Hi, and welcome to this introduction video to the subject investments. When we talk about investments, very often we also talk about financing. Of course, when you do investments, you need to find ways to finance it. But financing is going to be part of a subject later this semester, so for now it's just investments. While I'm doing this presentation, I want you guys to make some reflections as to what is to you an investment. When was the last time you did an investment? And did you consider it to be a good investment? What would you consider to be a good investment? Companies invest in several things. Some of the things that they invest in are easier to measure a profitability in than others. Of course, like on your left side, you have the vehicle, the tractor that a farmer uses for his production. Very easy, he can make assumptions and make calculations and see how much more can he produce on his fields if he would invest in this tractor. Also, if you do invest in stocks and other value papers, it's easy for you to see what is the return of your investment in financial terms. But what about when you send your employees to education? If you take them on courses, how do you measure the profitability of that investment? No doubt in your mind that you are doing an investment that will increase the value of your company. You have a higher the competences in your company is growing, your organization is growing, the knowledge is growing, but how do you measure that investment in terms of profitability? In that perspective, it makes sense to take the balanced scorecard perspective into the subject of investments as well. In the balanced scorecard perspectives, you have the customer perspective, the internal business processes, the organizational learning and development perspective as well, where you find key performance indicators that are interesting to be looking at and to measure growth in these key performance indicators and to see how the value of these are growing. So this is just to illustrate. We're not going deeper into balanced scorecard right now, but you can measure the profitability of different kinds of investments in different terms than just the financial one. Why do companies need to invest? Growth, you might say. And of course, companies invest to meet their goals. And of course, they are different when you take a look at companies' different strategies. But I have 5 reasons that I want you to know if I would ask you for the exam of why companies need to invest. Now, the first one is compelling reason, legislation. So if the government, or it could be the European Parliament, wants companies to take investment into climate investments, etc., that they need to do. Here they don't necessarily expect a higher return that they invest, but they have to do the investment. The second one is vital investments, investments that the company needs to do to ensure its survival. It could be if the production capacity that they have has been used for several years, perhaps has broken down, so they need to do a new investment like the previous one they had. Or if there are markets, business opportunities that they cannot miss, if the market goes in one direction, the company needs to follow that to ensure its existence. Very often when you go out in the companies, you will see investments that will be on the third part here, cost saving or revenue enhancing investments, meaning that the company can save costs. Very often these reasons to invest are combined. So for instance, like if you invest in a new facility that will make you as a company able to save energy, then of course you are saving costs as well. So there might be 2 benefits of doing these investments as well. Or there might be market opportunities on new markets that you want to enter to increase your revenue. So very often the third reason for investing is a big factor when you look at it in companies. Many companies also invest in projects. The energy business, energy sector is one of the sectors that does a lot of projects. They invest in the wind mills, wind energy or gas or oil or whatever. They make these in projects and try to do investments in projects for a very limited time. So projects could be one reason to invest as well. And then there are welfare investments, investments that you don't necessarily believe are going to give you a big return, but you do them for your employees, for instance, in the company, so that they will feel comfortable at work, not become ill, want to go to work, perhaps even want to perform better. These 5 reasons I want you guys to know. If I asked you for the exam, then you should mention these at least. There could be other reasons as well. Companies also, of course, have a higher goal in doing investments. Now, this blue model that you are looking at here, I call that the house of financial management. So, of course, when companies are doing investments, of course, they are doing those investments because they have planned some kind of activities. Activities that will ensure that they are reaching their goals within the next year, the coming period, or 3 to 5 years. And these goals are, of course, linked directly to the strategy, and the strategy, of course, should be linked to the vision. So they plan these different activities, sales, production, purchasing activities, and then they take a look. Do we have the capacity to actually perform these activities? Do we have the stock and machinery? Do we have buildings, know-how, the human resources that we need? Or do we need to do new investments in these parts? And then, of course, as the last step, how should we finance them? But even though a company has linked their investments into the strategy and the higher vision of the company, they might have to change plans. They might sometimes have to change strategy if market changes, and they have to adjust to these market changes. But also, if there are changes into the measurability. So we calculate the profitability of this investment, but what if you are doing an investment in a foreign country and the price of the currency of that foreign country that you have used to do the calculation changes drastically? Then you have to do new calculation and reconsider the investment as well. Customers might change their preferences as well. New trends, mega trends, do we have to follow those? Do we have to do investments, for instance, in lactose-free milk, or can we continue to do heavy investments in more conservative milk production? So if customers' trends are changing, and of course companies don't follow all trends, but mega trends, then you might reconsider some of your investment plans as well. And then, of course, the last one, if price or cost structure is changing, new competitors coming into the market, pressuring the prices, or you as a company, your cost structure is changing, raw materials becoming more increasingly expensive. So you have to recalculate your whole profitability analysis to these investments. And perhaps you need to change them. There are some characteristics of an investment that I want you guys to know and be able to mention and talk about. So the future return of an investment is expected to be higher than the investment itself. So the return exceeds the price of the investment. That would probably be how you also would consider a good investment. You get more than you give. Of course, if you are forced to do investments by legislation or by welfare, you don't necessarily make these considerations. And then there is a temporary displacements between cost and benefit. So there is this time span we need to take into consideration. And that's why we also work with interests, the calculation rate, when we talk about profitability analysis of an investment. So an investment is a connected series of payments. You start with a money outlay, so you pay some money for the investment, and then it comes in return as money return, so you receive money in return. the change in income. So investments, as I said, have a time preferences. We look at money cash flow, but we cannot compare these cash flow directly. So let me just demonstrate that. This is an investment profile, and this is a profile you need to be able to draw every time you're considering an investment. Now the green over here is illustrating the investment, and then the blue parts are the future change in income. Now the little green one on year 4 might be a scrap value. So do you have some kind of sales price you expect that you can sell your machine at the end of year 4? Or do you, as scrap value, remember, can also be negative if you need to make some cleanup costs or do some renovation as well. And it can be 0. But you cannot compare the amount in year 4, year 3, year 2, and year 1 with year 0. Money loses value over time. If you have 100 euros in your hand today and you walk into a grocery store and buy some stuff, you cannot a year from now go into the same grocery store with 100 euro and buy the exact same things. There are inflation. Prices are increasing, and therefore money loses value over time. So we need to take an interest into consideration so we can take the amounts from year 4, 3, and 2, and 1 back to year 0 and then compare it to the investment. Now the calculation rate has a definition. The calculation rate is the company's minimum requirement for return on the investment. Remember that. And how do they have a minimum required return? They can consider several things. So what return could the company get if they would invest in alternative investments, for instance, in stocks or bonds and stuff like that? They want that at least, right? Capital cost of finance sources. So if they have a loan, if they have an overdraft, they of course want the price that they are paying for the loan back in return. Or perhaps the company has a policy about a return on capital employed that they want on all of their investments. If there is a risk, new markets, new products always increases the risk and therefore increases the calculation rate. There might be other considerations that the company needs to take. So during the semester, you will meet 4 methods to calculate the profitability of an investment. The first one is the net present value or capital value method. The next one is internal rate of return. Third, annuity method. And the last one is the payback method. So these 4 methods is going to be presented in the next videos. This was a little longer introduction to investments in general. So when we meet in the classroom, we can start to talk more directly about practical investments in real life. I'll see you in class.